Hi there, this is Eshu. I'm the abbot here at Zenwest Buddhist Society. This Living Zen-podcast is just one of the many resources we've created at Zenwest to make Zen practice and training more available and accessible to people all over the world. Instructional videos, printable resources, and much, much more are also available on our website at www.zenwest.ca. If you're a regular listener, I'd love to hear from you. So please drop me an email at office@zenwest.ca and let me know who you are, how you got started, and what brought you to Zen. Everything we make available in person and online at Zenwest is only possible because of the support of our members and associates, people like you. If the efforts of our community are making a difference in your life, I'd like to invite you to show your support and take part in making it happen by becoming an associate or member of the Zenwest Sangha. You can do this by clicking the Join Us tab on our website at www.zenwest.ca. Thank you for your support, and thanks for listening. Today we'll continue investigating the gateless barrier. Case 13, Deshan carrying his bowls. Deshan one day descended to the dining hall, bowls in hand. Shui Feng asked him, "Where are you going with your bowls in hand, old teacher? The bell has not rung, and the drum has not sounded." Deshan turned and went back to his room. Shui Feng brought this up with Yantou. Yantou said, "Deshan, great as he is, does not yet know the last word." Hearing about this, Deshan sent for Yantou and asked, "Don't you approve of this old monk?" Yantou whispered his meaning. Deshan said nothing further. The next day, when Deshan took the high seat before the assembly, his presentation was very different than usual. Yantou came to the front of the hall, rubbing his hands and laughing loudly, saying, "How delightful! Our old boss has got hold of the last word. From now on, no one under heaven can outdo him." Wumenguan says, as to the last word, neither Yantou nor Deshan has yet dreamed of it. When I examine the case closely, I find it just like puppet theater. Wumenguan's verse says, "When you realize the first word, you understand the last. The first and the last. As to this, it is not one word." It's been a long time since we've had the opportunity to come together for this kind of intensive practice. And it certainly shows. It seems this morning like sitting and practicing with ghosts. It seems like everybody's a bit distracted, thinking about other things, miles away from this place. And this happens in practice. This happens in our lives. We get busy. We have a million different interests. We have all kinds of different things pulling at our minds and our hearts and our energies. And we become diffuse, dispersed across all of the innumerable facets of our life. The term for this kind of practice is sesshin. And sesshin, the word, means collecting or gathering together the heart, or the heart-mind. Shin is heart-mind. So it's important that we don't walk into this kind of practice and just remain diffuse, because we'll get caught. We'll get caught by the practice. We'll get caught by the form. We'll get caught by our own absent-mindedness. It's not a good thing or a bad thing. I'm not one of these old masters who's going to chase you around with a stick saying, "Wake up!" Well, I might once in a while. Each of us has to come to it ourselves. Each of us has to witness it ourselves. Each of us has to come to this practice and realize, wow, I haven't been here all morning. I've been expending the energy and vitality of my life doing something that I haven't even been doing all morning. So please, wake up. I wanted to mention something. It's something that I periodically like to remind people of, and I think this morning would be a great time to do it, is that our day, the schedule of our day is guided by instruments. Whether it's the kaihan, or it's the inkin bell that the jikijutsu rings, or whether it's the meal gong. Our schedule and our practice is guided by these instruments. And I don't use that word casually. They're instruments. They're musical percussion instruments. They're not noisemakers. So when we're using those instruments, the idea is not to just do it so we can get on to the next thing. And I've said this over and over and over again. There's a difference between hitting the bell, hitting the gong, hitting the han, and sounding the bell, sounding the gong, sounding the han. When we're engaging in this, we don't just smack it like it was some insect that we were trying to kill. We're coming together, bringing the whole activity of our life together in the sounding of that instrument. The sound that is produced is an experienceable manifestation of our capacity to make relationship. So if we're looking on to the next thing while we're making relationship, how is it that we make relationship with a human being? How is it that we make relationship in our work environment? How is it that we make relationship with people that we love? This gives us an indication if we're moving on to the next thing. Pay attention. Manifest with care. Manifest with love. Manifest with compassion. Manifest with wisdom. This simple activity of ringing the bell, sounding the gong, sounding the han, beating the drum, ringing the kesu, the big gongs for the bell, and especially with the big gong. If you're careless with that one, people will have damage. Today's case, Deshan one day descended to the dining hall, bowls in hand. Shui Feng asked him, "Where are you going with your bowls in hand, old teacher? The bell has not rung and the drum has not sounded." Deshan turned around and went back to his room. This first section of this koan is already complete as a koan. With all of these old masters, you have to spend some time coming to know these texts in order to really see to some degree what's going on. Deshan, in Japanese, Deshan is Tokusan, is his name. And in this case, he's in his later years, maybe 80 or so. And he's the abbot of a big monastery. Shui Feng is the Tenzo. And he's about my age. There's a bunch of different stories about this case, and one is that the meal was late, that Shuifeng was late preparing the meal. And Deshan showed up at the usual time for the meal and sat down ready for the meal to come out, but nothing happened. Shuifeng recognized this power conflict, or this sort of interaction. Just like we do today, even to this day, the meals are announced with a gong or with a drum. And neither had been sounded, because it's the tenzo that gives the signal for this. You don't call for the monks to come down and eat until there's something to eat. So Deshan comes down at the scheduled time. Shuifeng has this opportunity to go and challenge the teacher, pressing. "Where are you going with your bowls in hand, old teacher? The bell has not rung and the drum has not sounded." Deshan turned and went back to his room. This interaction, or this response, is remarkable. I know this has always been one of my favorite cases, because you always have to sort of point to the to the remarkable nature of this response, and part of it is Deshan's own practice. Deshan, or Tokuzan, is also in the Wumenguan, the Gateless Barrier, in case 28. And it talks a little bit about his background. And when he first started out as a monk, he was an expert, a scholar, a lecturer on the Diamond Sutra. And his story is that he, and the story that's sort of spread out a bit in case 28, is he used to write commentaries on the Diamond Sutra. And he would actually have them in like a hand cart, like a wheelbarrow full of his own commentaries. And he would sort of travel around the countryside giving these lectures on the Diamond Sutra. And, people would bring him in and he'd lecture to whole monasteries about the Diamond Sutra. And one day he was traveling along and he came to a little tea shop. And there he was challenged by the lady that ran the tea shop. And he was so overcome by this woman who ran the simple roadside cafe. He said, what's going on around here? How is it that this woman is able to completely tie me up, me, an expert in the Diamond Sutra? And she says, "Oh, you need to go up the hill and see the Zen master there." And so he went up the hill and saw the Zen master there. And Ryutan is his name in Japanese. And Ryutan had him into his abbot's room for several hours. And they sat there talking. And I'm imagining that actually Deshan did most of the talking. Sometimes this is the case with students who are eager to learn. They don't sometimes ask so many questions, but insist on talking and talking and talking and talking. So this conversation went on late into the night, until finally Deshan realized how late it was getting and said, I need to go now. So he got up and went to go out of the abbot's chamber. And he said, "Oh gosh, it's dark out there." So he turned around, and Ryutan, the master, had lit like a twisted paper candle and handed it to him. And then as soon as Deshan reached for this light, this candle, Ryutan blew it out. And it said that Deshan had this great awakening experience. And the next day, he came out in front of the Dharma hall with his wheelbarrow full of his commentaries on the Diamond Sutra and lit them on fire and said, even though your eloquence flows like a river, it's like throwing a hair into space. This is the history of Deshan, this old master. Earlier in his career as a Zen teacher, he was also famous for a sort of zealous use of the shouting and hitting people with a stick. 30 blows. Tokusan's 30 blows or 60 blows. He was famous for, having a question come, hit you with a stick. So to have this circumstance arise where he shows up as the abbot with his bowl set and he's challenged, I think overtly challenged by the Tenzo. Where are you going with your bowls in hand, old teacher? The bell has not rung and the drum has not sounded. Deshan turned and went back to his room. So knowing the history of this teacher, knowing the style and knowing his history for both speech and words as well as dynamic action, as Zen students, when we see him simply turn around and walk back to his room, we have to know something's up. We have to know that something is being demonstrated. And I think that if we all reflect on our own work, our own practice, particularly as it applies to practice that we engage in together, you can really see the capacity of Deshan. Whenever I'm talking about koans, I always remind people that when we're looking at these koans, we have to look at each koan and place our own heart into the bodies of each of the players, each of the circumstances, each of the objects in the koan. We have to imagine ourselves being this tenzo, practicing for several years and being given this responsibility, this position of responsibility in the monastic community for providing the food on time, healthy, enough. We have to imagine ourselves being the abbot of this monastery, having practiced for a long time. We can even imagine ourselves in each of those positions, just as we are, and feel our way through the koan and how we would respond. Maybe imagine or put ourselves into situations and circumstances that we have had ourselves that are similar. Arriving early for something before it's ready. Being late when you're supposed to be on time with something. Lots of thinking, lots of self-criticism, lots of blaming going on. And certainly, I think, for the Tenzo, in this circumstance, he's functioning just as each of us would, I think. Each of us at least would be tempted to be finding fault, finding an opportunity to demonstrate the quality of our practice. And it's in this that Deshan really shows his character and the depth of his practice, because what's said here is that Deshan turned and went back to his room without shaking his head, without pulling rank or authority, without pointing out that actually the meal was late he simply turned and walked away. When we practice together as a group, there are always lumps and bumps in how we practice. And our form, the form that we use in this tradition, provokes these lumps and bumps. We don't aim at creating a system or a form or a structure that's going to be flawless. In a lot of ways, we have a practice that has a lot of really sharp corners, so that when we drift off, when we fall asleep, when we're not paying attention, when we're not keenly aware of what's going on in our bodies and in our hearts, we find ourselves sort of like skipping off to one side while everyone else has taken the corner. Whoops! And they happen all over the place. We have to be kind with one another. We have to be forgiving with one another. We have to be understanding with one another. But we also have to allow each other to fall off once in a while. Each of us is different. Each of us comes to our practice with different kinds of challenges, different bodies, at different times of our lives, different genders, all manner of differences, and yet we try to come together in this harmonious practice. And as we do this practice together, we can find that just the variation, just the differences between us can cause us to have all kinds of upwellings of thoughts and upwellings of emotions. And the practice of engaging in silent harmony together draws this up even more. So Deshan, turning and leaving in silence, provides a spaciousness, provides an opportunity, provides a corner for Shuifeng, the Tenzo, to see something. But when we look at the next paragraph, we can understand that Shuifeng missed Deshan's demonstration. If he hadn't, perhaps the case would have ended here with something like Shuifeng was greatly awakened. But what happens is Shuifeng brought up this matter with Yantou. Yantou is a little bit younger than Shuifeng, actually, but he's called the man of talent. He actually died quite young, but these two are often compared together or contrasted with one another. Shuifeng later went on to become a great teacher, but it was through a great deal of effort, always a bit of a rough road for Shuifeng, whereas Yantou seemed to have insight into this matter naturally. Again, this personal differences. Traditionally, they would say it, personal karma. Just the different bags that each of us comes to this practice with, this different conditioning, the different histories. So Shuifeng brought it up with Yantou, and I'm sure that it was done in a sort of like buddy kind of environment. Ho, Deshan, great as he is, does not yet know the last word. I got one over on him. He's kind of bragging to Yantou that he pulled one over on the notorious and fierce Deshan. But what is this? What is this he's talking about here? if we practice in this way, we're practicing for the benefit of all beings, for the benefit of our Sangha members. We're practicing to inspire, to encourage, to demonstrate and clear a path for each other to awakening. This idea of getting in the last word seems kind of out of place. But certainly this is the perspective even today that's given about Zen, about things like Dharma combat, where it's like the idea or the image that's given is often like, ho ho, ha ha, get one over on the other guy. But that's not the spirit of our practice. When we engage in these kinds of interactions, it's really important that we first of all really connect with the person that we're sparring with. When Keegan was doing judo, there was this often there was this discussion about randori, which is the sort of open sparring in judo, and they would say you've got to take care of your training partner, because you cannot develop in this martial art without having a training partner that is equal or slightly better or just slightly less experienced than you. You've got to take care of them. So even when you're throwing them in judo, you never let go of them and let them hit the mat. You carry them to the floor, so that they will get up uninjured, so that you can have another opportunity to train with them, so that they learn by being thrown and you learn by throwing, and it goes back and forth. And this is the spirit of these kinds of interaction. But Shui Feng is missing it here, and Yanto sees it. Shui Feng is bragging. And so Yanto, when I trained, there was a monk who used to behave very much like Yanto, slippery devil, this guy. I remember one time Nikki was talking about going to Las Vegas and wanting to travel to Las Vegas together. And I was always saying like, oh my God, Las Vegas. If there's a place on this earth that I don't ever want to go, if there's a place on this earth that really is the embodiment of everything that I just don't want to have anything to do with, it's Las Vegas. And he says, oh, I know, man. Oh, Las Vegas. What a terrible, awful place. And then during the course of the time I was down, this monk and I had to go to like a Trader Joe's or some store in the United States, and we were waiting in a line, and the cashier was super friendly and talking to all these people, and they had just come back from a holiday, and he was telling everybody about the holiday, and of course he went to Las Vegas, and wasn't it wonderful and awesome? And the same monk said, I know, I love Las Vegas. It's like the best place on earth. And I went, wow. And both times he completely meant what he was saying. So, and I feel like for me, this particular monk was offering a reflection or offering meeting me, making relationship with me in a way that created space, created an opportunity. So you can adjust your posture if you like. So rather than disagreeing with Shui Feng, rather than saying, hey, Deshan really is great and you better watch it. The fact that he walked away, man, that's dangerous. he doesn't do that. He doesn't press against Shui Feng. He actually stretches him out even further and says, great as he is, he does not yet know the last word. And of course, as we know, in Zen centers and in every kind of community, somehow these kinds of private conversations travel very quickly. And so word gets back to Deshan that Yanto, who he usually considers a very in-depth, wise, kind, compassionate student, he heard that he said this about him. Doesn't know the last word. And so he asks him, which is great, I think. It's a very transparent, good way to make relationship. He calls Yanto, his student, to his room and says, don't you approve of me? Don't you approve of this old monk? And Yanto whispered his meaning. That's all the case says. Yanto whispered his meaning. So another way that this might be translated is Yanto shared the secret. So Yanto was up to something from the beginning. Yanto knows that he's stretching out Shui Feng, and he explains it to Deshan. And what does Deshan do? Does he, again, give a big long teisho about this, that, and the other? No. Does he smack Yanto with a stick or shout? No. Deshan said nothing further. So his role in this koan, although it's got his name in the title, Deshan carrying his bowl, so far Deshan turned and went back out of his room, and Deshan said nothing further. The next day, when Deshan took the high seat before the assembly, his presentation was very different than usual. So what does that mean? We have this form here where I come in and I do prostrations and offer incense and there's chanting and all this kind of stuff. And somehow it doesn't go into in the case. Deshan, his presentation was unusual, different than usual. So without saying anything further to Yanto, Deshan is playing along with Yanto. Deshan is presenting, again, some kind of opportunity for something to take place. Some kind of opportunity, some kind of opening. Yanto came to the front of the hall, rubbing his hands and laughing loudly, saying, "Oh, how delightful! Our old boss has got hold of the last word. From now on, no one under heaven can outdo him." So Yanto steps forward and points out this difference, this different way of being, this physicality, something odd that Deshan is doing, and says, oh. Although I may have said that he doesn't quite have it, clearly now he does. And this is all a big joke. A big joke, or pointing out the nose on Shui Feng's face. Shui Feng is bound, as we all get bound from time to time. Hopefully it's just from time to time, in the idea of right and wrong, and good and bad, and winning and losing, and better and worse, and enlightened and ignorant. He's tied up in it. He's tied up in his own insight, and he's tied up in trying to be better than. And the things that he's using to assess where he is, and assess where his teacher is, and assess where his brothers in the Dharma are physical. they're very superficial. They're common. And this is the example that's being demonstrated. And as we know, these kinds of physical, superficial circumstances, behaviors, interactions, they're very easily manipulated. And so if we are relying on those things as our gauge, as our metric or as our benchmark for our own practice, the depth of our own practice, the depth of our teacher's practice, the depth of anybody's practice. If we're saying, oh, that person's too fat, or that person's too skinny, or that person's too young, or that person's too old, or that person's not Asian, or that person's whatever. When we're trying to assess our value, whether we're basing it on, and when I say value, I mean, in the context of this, I'm talking about wisdom, maybe, manifest Buddha nature, if you like. But I think it goes far beyond that in how we perceive the world around us. If we're trying to assess our value based on comparison to this and that, how we behave, the color of our skin, our weight, our gender, our sexual preferences, whatever, we're just making a big mistake. Rinzai points to this and he talks about it, being like actors on a stage. And we get so caught up on that with the actors that are going on the stage. But our practice is about the breath, coming back to investigating what it is that animates the actors on the stage. And it animates the heroes, and it animates the villains, and it animates the monsters and the angels and everybody on the stage equally. What is this? That's our practice. Don't get tied up by the actors on the stage. Wumen says, as to the last word, neither Yanto nor Deshan has yet dreamed of it. You could say Yanto or Deshan or Shui Feng or Bodhidharma or the Buddha. Wumen's a devil when he gets into his comments. He's a joker. He's a comedian. He's a poker and a prodder. This last word, we come to our Zen practice thinking, if I could just grab something, if I could just have awakening or have enlightenment or have some kind of experience, and everything would be just hunky-dory. And this is this last word. And so if you miss the point of this case, if you miss what Yanto is pointing out to Shui Feng with Deshan's help, if you miss this whole hook of, he doesn't even know the last word, then Wumen will set it even more deeply. As to the last word, neither of them have even dreamed of it. When I examine the case closely, I find it's just like puppet theater. And Aitken Roshi in his translation says like Punch and Judy's. Or Ernie and Bert, or the Muppets. Just play acting. There was a great movie I saw once, a little documentary about the man who did Elmo, the voice for Elmo. And it kind of followed him around, and whenever he had Elmo on, like the camera always just shows Elmo, but when you have a wider view of everything, you see the puppeteer and the puppet. And he would walk up to people whether they were 6 years old or whether they were 90 years old, and he would do the voice of Elmo, and he would talk. And the person would, I don't think I ever saw anybody talk to him. They would always look at the puppet, talk to the puppet. Even though they know, even though it's obvious the man's standing there with the puppet on his arm, they would engage with the puppet. And this is the place that this koan points to. What is it that moves the puppets? Wumen's verse says, when you realize the first word, you understand the last. Again, offering us this idea or this bait of first and last, a beginning and an end. The first and the last, as to this, it is not one word. Or you could say, it is no word. Well, there's a strong temptation to say more about this last line. The first and the last, as to this, it is not one word, no word. But I think I'll take Deshan's advice and just say nothing further. Thank you. Thanks for listening to the Living Zen podcast. If you follow Living Zen through iTunes, I would very much appreciate it if you would take a moment to let me know what you think about it by rating or reviewing the podcast, so that new listeners can also hear what you have to say. Thank you for your time and for your support.